It's a process. And here's the
Mhm.
thing, there's not a system. Input doesn't always equal output. Input consistently equals progress.
My guest this week is Bethany Rees, leadership coach and host of Leadership on the Rocks podcast, and just a really cool human. So I hope you enjoy this week. Thanks. So welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with Michelle and my special guest, Bethany Rees. And Bethany is a leadership coach, podcast host of Leadership on the Rock, and author of a manuscript that is currently being, shopped around, if you will, and decided on who's going to publish. And I cannot wait to read it. And everyone's going to understand why after you listen to Bethany and what's going on. And we're also connected through John Maxwell, Maxwell Leadership, and that was a really cool connection. And I want to thank Michael Stinnett, the Unstuck coach, because he's the one that connected the both of us. So thank you for that. And the other thing that I'll say, and it's something that you said, is Bethany is someone who's been there, done that, and bought the t-shirt. So it's, I just love the visual. Bethany, you have a quote that you're going to kick us off with, which is our topic for today. And it's a quote that's from you. And so no one better to speak it than you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And, this quote I have lived out. It has changed my mindset about everything when it comes to leadership. And the quote is, leadership isn't a destination to be reached. It's a body to be nourished. And it took me a long time to understand that because I, probably like most of you out there, we think of leadership as a place to go. We want that corner office. We want that title. But let me tell you what happens whenever you do get that promotion. You're on the mountaintop of promotion, and then you immediately slide down the avalanche of reality. We're talking Jumanji level 5 of problems, conflicts, constraints. And then you just sit at this valley of overwhelm. And then you're sitting there of, I don't know how to overcome all of these things. And that's why leadership isn't a destination. It's a body that you have to nourish. There is a head of leadership, the mindset. There's the heart of leadership, which is relationships. And then you have the hands of leadership, which is execution. And then the guts of leadership, which is accountability. But again, the reason I've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt is I learned all those lessons the hard way.
Well, and that's what I love about the whole idea with Leadership on the Rocks. And then your visual logo with literally the drink with the ice cubes in it. Because it is that combo. What came to mind for me when you were talking about leadership is it does start with us, right? It's not a destination, to your point, because when I think about that, I go back to Atomic Habits, right? James Clear, that his whole thing is if your goal is to run a marathon, right? You run the marathon, your goal's done. But if your goal is to become a marathon runner, and that's who your identity is, and you embody that, then all of a sudden the decisions you make are going to be aligned with someone who's a marathon runner. And I think the same thing happens with what you're talking about with leadership. To be a leader and embody a leader is all the stuff that you just talked about, the head, the heart, the guts, the hands, all of it, because it's how are we feeling? What are we exuding? How are we treating people? What are our behaviors, right?
Absolutely.
And there's so much power in that. And I'm going to freaking quote you, woman, because I absolutely love it's a body to be nourished, because that is the truth.
Mm-hmm. And, as we dive into leadership, people that grow into leadership, here's what happens when you get that promotion, right? Your organization will give you the title, the pay, and the people, but they don't equip you to lead. It is on yourself for personal growth, personal development to grow as a leader. We cannot depend on our organizations to do that for us. But I want to caution you, if you go to the gym or you know people that go to the gym and maybe you've seen them out and about in public as you people watch, and you see somebody who's like ripped on the top and they work out their arms a lot, but they don't work out their legs, then you have like an imbalance.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of leaders who are great leaders, but they really focus on one area of that body. Maybe they focus on the relationship piece, but they're not really good at execution. Or they're really good at execution, but they're terrible with accountability. You have to work out the entire aspect of that body of leadership to be an effective, essential leader.
I don't disagree with anything that you said. And my brain went to, I'm going to put myself in the position of someone listening to this. And let's say, because I end up, and I'm sure you do too, coaching people that end up in that leadership role, whether you're a first-time leader or you've stepped up to another level of leadership, and you look around and you don't know where the resources are to be able to close gaps that you perceive may
Mhm.
exist. Because I think a lot of it is sit back and ask yourself, and I wonder what your recommendation would be is how do I identify where those areas are that I need to work out? So yeah, I've got big muscles up top and my legs are super skinny. That's not the case with me, by the way. But what I'm saying is how do I know? Because it's like, do I hold my own mirror up?
Mhm.
Where are some things to go? I have thoughts, but I'm super curious as to what your experience has been or what you recommend.
Well, I think there's a multiple different ways. Everything starts with self. I want you to picture
Mhm.
like a fountain, right? A fountain has a pump that pushes the water up and then it cascades down. Everything starts with the self. So self-reflection. John Maxwell talks about the law of awareness. You have to know yourself before you can grow yourself.
Yeah.
And so really dive deep. We like to stay in the shallow pool of reflection. We really do. And we got to go deep. We got to ask the questions around our actions, our beliefs, and then, well, what's frustrating us? Why is that
Mhm.
frustrating us? It's almost like this aspect of cultural intelligence of understanding the why behind our what, our actions, and then ask for feedback. But there's a huge caveat there. You have to make it a safe place for people to give you real feedback because otherwise they won't. They'll just be like, oh, no, you're great. And so start with self, true reflection, prayer, reflection, meditation, journaling, and then figuring that out. And then as you build great relationships with people, then you can say, hey, where are my blind spots? And then
Mhm.
hopefully you've created a safe space where they'll actually tell you.
Yeah. And the other part of it is too, I think, is ready yourself for that feedback. Because
Mm-hmm.
feedback can be scary. All
Yes.
right. And so a lot of times what people will do is what feedback do you have for me? And then they retreat, right? Emotionally retreat. And people see that.
Yeah.
So it's like be ready for it. The other thing that I'll say with feedback that I think is so vitally important is how you respond to it. So you ready yourself for it. Someone gives you the feedback. Typically what I found, and myself included, I have to monitor it, is I'm going to make excuses for, if you will, why something happened the way it did. Well, because of I did. People aren't giving us
Mm-hmm.
feedback to hear the reasons why we did what we did.
Yeah.
They're giving us their perspective. And so for me, what I caution myself and other people is just say thank you.
Yes.
Just say thank you.
Mm-hmm. You
And
are
it's the
so
hardest thing.
You are so spot on. And, as I talked about, leadership's not a destination. For those that are sitting in the valley of overwhelm, maybe they have imposter syndrome or they don't know how they're going to overcome the problems they're dealing with, the constraints they're dealing with, or the conflicts on their team. And if you sit in that valley too long, you are going to become you're going to have despair. You're going to lose hope. You might even become cynical. I hope you don't ever. And so the way that you get out of that is you start figuring out, okay, where is the hope? How can I grow? And this is where mindset comes into play. And I told
Mm-hmm.
you the first part of the body of leadership is the head. It is the mindset because how you think about things will completely affect your experiences. And
Mm-hmm.
so as you seek feedback, as you're learning to grow, you have to have that growth mindset of my identity is bigger than my title, my paycheck, or the feedback that I'm getting. My purpose is bigger than my title, my paycheck, and the feedback that I'm getting. And so stay that higher level with that growth mindset and then welcome it of how can I improve to serve
Mm-hmm.
better. And so it's got to start with the head of leadership every single time, your mindset. So get your mind right and then you will be able to grow from that feedback.
I'm bobbleheading because I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, and I'm also wondering because what tips and tricks do you have for people? And you and I both know when we coach people that we tend to tell ourselves that where we're at in this space that we're at is absolutely truth, right?
Mhm.
There's no way out. I can't do it. I mean, because I end up with people that will and justify, well, it's okay to vent. It's okay to feel that way. It's okay to whatever. And my response to them is this, yes, but how long do you need to do that? I look at positive intelligence to where if you put your hand on a hot stove, how long do you actually need to have your hand on that hot stove before you realize, oh, it's hot to be able to pull it back? Like a second, right?
Mhm.
That's how long those feelings serve us as a warning, as an awareness to
Mhm.
wake up and shift. And what happens a lot of times I've found is we tend to sit in it too long and then it's self-fulfilling or self-perpetuating. So I think that's part of it too, is if you start to go down this path that feels heavy and weighted, stop yourself because that's not the right path. That's the lie. So how can you flip the narrative or what's going on in your head to get to a positive space to be able to move forward?
Hmm.
What are your thoughts? Because it's easier said than done.
Absolutely. Now I'm sitting here bobbleheading because
Yeah.
everything you said is so on point. And here's the deal. You can capture your thoughts, right? Because as we think, so we feel, so we act. We linger in our feelings way too much and they are
Mhm.
so deceptive. And so you have to capture them and say, what do I know is true? And then, we are so focused on the rocks in our shoes that we forget the sucker in our mouth, the sweetness of life. So have some gratitude and,
Candies.
don't always focus on that rock in your shoe.
I love
And
it.
and so, who told me that? My daughter. My daughter read something and she came home from school. This was actually yesterday. And she's like, Mom, I'm going to stop focusing on the rock in my shoe and focus more on the sucker in my mouth. I was like, what is this wisdom for my 14-year-old? Oh my
I
gosh.
love it.
Yes. And so, as things are happening, capture your thoughts and then
Mhm.
say, what do I know is true? I know that I am safe. I am loved. I have this. I have that. Focus on that gratitude. And then you can make a plan for how to get out of that hard situation or how to grow through it. And this is where I love
Mhm.
mantras. And this is also where you learn to not listen to yourself, but talk to yourself. And I don't
Hmm.
remember who told me that phrase, but it's so beautiful. Don't listen to yourself.
I love
Talk
that.
to yourself. Self talk is so important. And so I have so many mantras that help me get out of my feelings and capture my thoughts to turn around. And, one of those is I can do hard things. You know what? At the end of
Mm.
the day, I'm going to learn a great lesson through this hardship. I don't know what it is yet, but it's
Yeah.
coming. And you just reset your whole mind and then you can step forward and continue on and not get stuck in it.
I I love that. It takes me back to a couple things, and one of it is the hard thing part, where you've got people that believe that it's going to get easier.
Mhm.
And it's going to get easier. And here's the truth of it. It doesn't ever get easier. We get better at doing hard.
Mhm.
And that's what happens. And the thing next to it is if you look back at your 18-year-old self, right? Would your 18-year-old self be able to do what you're able to do today? Accomplish the things you're able to do. And the majority of people, I'm going to say all of them that I've talked to, go, yeah, no. Because we get better at hard. We get better at hard. We're just layering that stuff on.
Mhm.
The other thing that came to mind for me is the talking to ourselves part
Yeah.
is the shifting that narrative that we have going to owning what's really happening. So for instance, and I've seen clients just in front of me shift like that from I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, and I'm sure you hear a lot of people own that. And if we say it enough, like James Clear from Atomic Habits, it becomes our identity, right?
Mhm.
So now all of a sudden, and if you're someone who that's your identity, your brain's going to work overtime to make sure everything in your environment and your behaviors align to that identity. So guess what happens if you're someone who's stressed? You don't pull out of that, what is it, the valley of despair?
Mhm. The
So we
valley of
don't we
overwhelm.
yeah,
Yeah.
valley of overwhelm. Thank you. I'm going to learn that stuff. So the we don't pull out of that so easily, but we can just flip it and say, okay, what's happening
Mhm.
right now? To your point, facts that has me feeling this way. Okay, great. So instead of I'm stressed, it's like, wow, there's a lot of new and different things going on right now.
Yeah.
Or wow, I've got some really interesting challenges ahead. And all of a sudden, the whole energy shifts, and I can move forward instead of just being stuck in that space.
Hmm. Absolutely. And this is where leadership on the rocks comes in. And yes, my logo for the podcast is a whiskey glass because when things are not going well, we say, I need a drink on the rocks or my marriage is on the rocks, my job is on the rocks.
Yeah.
And we got to flip that to say, you know what, I'm going to be intentional. And when you build a house, what's the most important part of the house? The foundation that it's
Hmm.
built on to hold it up. And so I want you to imagine being on the beach and we got to stop building these sandcastle lives, sandcastle thought patterns that are so susceptible and easily pushed by the trends, the waves of our circumstances, the
Hmm.
elements, the winds. And you've got to get off that beach, right? And then get higher on higher ground and build your life and your leadership on the rocks. Those universal principles where you are intentional in saying, here's what my life is built on, and it can withstand all the storms that come. Because whether you're on the beach or high on the rock, and that's where you build your identity, storms are coming. But guess
Hmm.
which one's going to withstand the storm? The one that has the strongest foundation, the one that's on the rocks.
Yeah. It takes me back. There was, I was looking for quotes when you and I were gonna record. And one of them was from J.K. Rowling around that is that, um, something along the lines of she hit rock bottom and that's what she built her life on. And so it is along that thing, and it doesn't have to be a negative thing, but it's like, to your point, we don't have to hit rock bottom. Let's
Mhm.
start with rocks, right? And if we start with rocks, we're more proactive around that to build a more solid foundation. And it's different for everyone because we're all at different places in our journey. But I think part of that is you can look in yourself to figure out what that is. You can get feedback from other people to go, hey, look at me, and people that you respect, okay, and
Mhm.
people that are on a similar path, similar thought patterns to where you're at, not the friend that goes, Eeyore in the room, right? Don't go to
Yeah.
Eeyore. But it's something like that, and ask them, where do I start? What are your thoughts? What do you see from your perspective? Because the perspective that we have when we look in the mirror is still our perspective.
Mhm.
And so get feedback from other people and take that
Yes.
in to figure out what does your rock look like? What do your rocks look like that you start
Mhm.
building?
Absolutely. And I would encourage you to make sure you have on the right pair of glasses. If you are looking through the lens, and I hate to say it this way, but of arrogance and pride, you have some
Um,
very fogged up glasses. And so you need the prescription of gratitude and humility. That
mhm.
way you can see clearly the feedback that's coming or what you need to change, to be intentional to change so that you can get out of that valley of overwhelm.
Yeah. When you said glasses, I went to just the lens that we see stuff through. Sean Aker wrote Happiness Advantage, and there's a YouTube video that I share with tons of people. It's like a 12-minute from his TEDx. And it's along those same lines, but it's about what are we filtering life through? Are
Hmm.
we filtering through this negative life is being done to me instead of for me view? And so when that happens, we end up not being as resilient as we can be. I mean, I'll tell people all the time because they look around and they're like, well, I can't do it because of this, and I can't do it because of this, and I
Hmm.
can't do it because of this. And this is what I say is if I know everything about your external environment, everything, I can
Hmm.
only predict 10% of your future happiness. And the beauty in that, the silver lining in that is the fact that we have more control than what we ever gave ourselves credit for. So
Hmm.
I agree with you. Shift the lens
Yeah.
that you're seeing life through, and then you're going to see the possibilities instead of all the stuff that you can't do.
Absolutely. And here's the deal, as we talk about the body of leadership and muscles going to the gym, when you're working out, you're actually tearing the muscles so that they grow back
Mhm,
stronger. And I know that we don't like failure. I know that we don't like anything less than perfection. But number one, perfection isn't possible. Everything is about progress. And
mhm,
so I often tell people don't trust people in leadership positions that don't walk with a limp. If they don't walk with a limp, they haven't been through hard stuff and they haven't learned the lessons. And so we've got to stop running away from hardships. When
mhm,
they come, that's where you grow your leadership muscles, is through
mhm,
those things. What did I learn from this? It stunk. I didn't want to go through it, but I did go through it. What have I learned from it? And how can I
mhm.
grow my leadership muscles because of it? So don't run
Well,
away from
and
those hardships.
the other thing that came to mind for me, Bethany, when we were just talking is when you're in that leadership position, right? Whatever level of leadership, if you have people reporting to you, so you're a people leader, share with them, be transparent with them about the limps or the knocks or the stuff that you went through, right? Because otherwise people look at it and they'll look at themselves and where they are in life and look at you and where they perceive you are. It's almost like the curated reality on
Yeah.
social media, right? They're like, oh my God, their life is perfect. There's never, no, there isn't a human on the planet that doesn't go through stuff.
Hmm.
But be transparent as a leader so that your people realize that they themselves can see themselves in that journey to the level that you're at. And I think
Absolutely.
it's so powerful. And the higher up in leadership you go, the more important that is. I have a friend who's I've coached her for over 10 years, but a senior leader. And she was going to be speaking at this graduation for this group of graduates, MAs, medical assistants. And she said, I don't know what to say. And I said, well, part of it needs to include your journey. You were where they were at one point. Granted, you were an
Mhm.
RN and not an MA, but I think part of that is give people like breadcrumbs along the way to where they can see themselves in that path if that's where they aspire to be. But if we show up all polished and everything else, people can check themselves out.
Absolutely. There's such power in authenticity. And I know that's kind of a buzzword these days. And don't fake the authenticity either. But,
Yeah.
as a leader, and so I came from the education world, and one of the best teaching models is as I'm introducing a new content or concept to students is I talk my thoughts out loud.
Mm,
Here's a problem that we're trying to solve, whether it be math or if I'm writing a piece. Here's what I'm thinking and here's what I'm wondering. And you're modeling that thought process that you went
mm,
through too. And so you're very transparent in showing what it takes to get there. But testimony connects people. Our stories is what builds the relationships. And so you
mhm,
do have to open up and be authentic and share your stories because the struggle is real for everybody.
mhm.
Everybody has the constraint of 24 hours. Everybody has that side of the family that they're dealing with. You know, be transparent, explain it. And it'll just help grow the relationships and have true connectedness. And that's the second
Yeah.
thing of the heart of leadership is those relationships. It
Mhm.
matters.
Oh, yeah, the rapport, the connectedness, because that's where the trust gets built. It's
Mhm.
not, the trust doesn't happen here. The trust happens here.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's people feel safe. They feel like there's consistency, that they can let their guard down, all that stuff. But my brain goes a lot of different directions, right? One of the directions it went, and I want to share this tip, is when you were talking as a teacher, that you said out loud, you're thinking, right?
Mhm.
So here's what it was. You didn't just arrive at it. You arrived at the journey to problem solve that. I'm a coach for small business administration. There's a group of entrepreneurs that are going through learning about managing their business and everything. And so one of the instructors in one of these modules shared a trick, which I just want to share, is
Yeah.
that was around the thinking out loud thing. They said, say you're an entrepreneur, self-employed, you are one deep. You're looking at how do you get other people to step in, and it can be this way if you're W-2 as well. But step in and do jobs, you can't let go of it, people don't do it right, whatever that may be. Record either Zoom call, yourself doing that job, or use your phone, thinking through out loud what your thoughts are to be able to arrive at whatever this process is. So I'm starting now, this is what I'm thinking, I go look at this is this client with whatever, and so that's why I do. But you triggered me and reminded that it's like record it out loud, give the recording to the person so that they have
Mhm.
your thoughts and not just this flat file of instruction, and have them create an SOP, right? Standard
Yeah.
operating procedure for that process that you can then review to understand, hey, did they get what I'm talking about?
Mhm.
But then you're able to expand your reach, be able to delegate tasks, right? Or leverage other people to do things and have a more comparable outcome that is you would, because they understand your thinking.
Man,
That's
and
where my brain went when you said standing in front of the room as a teacher, because I think it's brilliant.
it is. And we don't do that. We don't onboard our employees, right? We
No.
don't we don't say, "Hey, this is who we are. Welcome to the team," and then say, "This is how you do your job." We don't
Mhm.
show the standard of excellence that we really want them to have. And then, or if we do have a one-day training, because that's usually what happens, then you're like, "All right, go forth. You're trained." That's with everything. And then we just kind of like pat them on the butt and send them off. And there's got to be that follow-up coaching element to it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you're so spot on. And this is good parenting advice too, right? You can't tell your kids just one time.
Yeah.
You've got to nourish that relationship, not only tell, model, showcase, you know, talk through the thinking. That is excellent onboarding, excellent support. And you're also setting the standard at the level of which you want people to produce or work.
Yeah. There was one other thing someone said about parenting, is that you can't tell your kids, go clean your room. And this works in organizations too, right? So if
Mhm.
you're here in leadership, you understand everything involved in this task or this thing that you told people to go do. Go analyze. It's zero balance analysis. I was in finance, right? Go do a zero balance analysis, which is all these accounts, right, that went to zero, that have a zero balance. Well, if you don't understand the components into doing a zero balance analysis, what are you
Mhm.
doing?
Yeah.
What are you going to be analyzing? If a child doesn't understand, go clean your room, and they go in and think my room's fine. But if you go that next layer down and go pick up the food, bring the food in, the dirty dishes that are underneath your bed, pick up the
Mhm.
clothes that are dirty and put them in the hamper. I mean, specifics.
Yeah.
So that now you're giving people insight into what clean your room means.
Hmm.
You do this, you do this, you do this. And it's more successful. And I think it's the same thing as we're developing ourselves or developing as leaders. If you hear a term that someone says to you, go do this, like, hey, start with your mindset. And in your head, you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Ask the question, where do I start? What does that
Hmm.
mean? Right. And so I think those lessons about how we develop people or develop ourselves or whatever it may
Yeah.
be, there's common themes.
Hmm.
What does it take to get there?
You know, I'm sitting here thinking just my brain is going 90 to nothing, but I want to simplify it through the heart of leadership, the hands of
Yes.
leadership, and then the guts of leadership, right? The heart
Yes.
of leadership is relationships, and that is communication. How do we build relationships? Communication. It's how we talk to one another. And there is such a lack of clarity in how we communicate, and especially at work. The cleaning
Mhm.
of the room is perfect because it's the perfect example of at work, somebody could assign or delegate something to you and you don't really know what they want. You don't know where the mark is. And then cleaning the room is the same. My level of cleaning the room and my teenagers completely different. You have to have clarity in what you're talking about and what that means.
Mhm.
Because if you leave all the gray space, people tell themselves stories. And I love
Mhm.
Brene Brown's just the best at explaining this.
Yeah.
We fill the gap with the information of, well, I guess this is what she means, or her tone meant this, or whatever. And that's
Mhm.
terrible. So be
Yeah.
clear with your communication. But then the hands of leadership is you have to have clear processes, procedures of how to do things, systems, processes, streamlining so it all fits together. You've got to organize the work. And
Mhm.
then the next thing is the guts of leadership, which is accountability, is
Mm.
I have to speak up if the work is not at the standard. Or, and
Mhm.
here's my favorite thing. And I was a high school administrator. And so if somebody is not doing their job well, number one, it's on me because I don't know if I was clear. I have to ask myself, was I clear in my expectation?
Mhm.
That's number one. So it's my fault. Number two, it's still my fault because did I train and coach them to that level of excellence or the level of
Mhm.
standard? It's my fault if I didn't. Then level three, if I've told you clearly what the expectation was, if I coached you and trained you in it, then number three, okay, now we're having a different conversation. The
Mhm.
accountability is on you. And
Yeah.
so often, leaders, managers, I should say, I'm going to call you managers on this one.
Yeah.
Managers will say, well, they should know.
Mhm.
They skip number one and number two. I didn't
Yeah.
tell you clearly, and I definitely didn't train you on what the standard was, and now it's your fault. And that is
Mhm.
how we typically operate in parenting and in business, and it's just not right. That is
No, I
terrible
agree.
accountability.
Yeah. I go back to when you said that, is go in. If you got people that are low performers not hitting the standard, don't go in accusing like you know what the heck's going on. Okay.
Mhm.
Go in with curiosity. And part of it for me is to say, hey, here's the expectation, here's what's going on. Help me understand what's getting in the way.
Yeah.
Because then you can start unpacking. Then, to your point, you create the space to where someone's going, okay, they really want to know what's happening. Well, I really don't understand XYZ. Great. And to your point, okay, maybe it's number one, wasn't clear
Yeah.
enough. Oh, maybe I didn't coach you. But if we go in telling ourselves that this person's lazy or they just don't care or whatever, we're gonna lose potentially a good person because we haven't
Mhm.
created the space for them to say, hey, Houston, we got a problem. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
But then go in with curiosity. What's getting in the way? I love the clarity around those things.
And
Um,
again, all of these are lessons learned the hard way. The first couple of conversations I had, accountability conversations, I learned real quick, oh, I was not clear. Oh, I didn't even train you. Oh, okay. But in thinking of all of that through the body of leadership, I talk about 8 essential rocks in each of these areas. But in accountability specifically is the rock of stewardship. We have got to train our brains to say, this stuff is not mine. I am a steward of my team, my employees. I am
mhm.
here to nourish and take care of. So the accountability, whenever we say that, we usually think I'm holding other people accountable.
Yeah,
Step one is hold yourself accountable.
yeah,
You are there to care for and to nourish and to grow and to cultivate and to get results. And so most of that accountability is on you first. And we got
yeah.
to, so stewardship helps you transition that mindset.
I love that. The other thing around accountability is to develop and nourish the accountability within the people on your team
Hmm.
so that you don't have to hold them
Yeah.
accountable, right? Because that's punitive, discipline, whatever, but create and nourish that accountability. And guess what happens? Cy Wakeman says engagement comes right along with it.
Yeah.
Because if we have engagement without accountability, we have entitlement.
Oh, that's so true.
So there's so many in that. I could frickin' talk to you for days. We don't have days. I want to first say thank you, thank you, thank you. What I'd love to hear from you though, or what are one or two things you want people to walk away with around this topic that we've been chatting about?
It- It's such a great question. Leadership is such a complex thing, just like parenting is so complex. And so don't let it overwhelm you. Every day, just think, how am I going to learn the lesson from where it all went wrong? How am I going to grow? And
Mhm,
then, really just check your own internal heart of why are you leading? Why are you serving? Why are you stepping up into this position? And so it's a process. And here's the
mhm,
thing, there's not a system. Input doesn't always equal output. Input consistently equals progress. And that's what you
mm,
have to focus on. Stay consistent in growing and learning. And don't compare yourself. Comparison is the thief of joy. Don't compare
mhm,
yourself to other leaders. Learn from them, yes. Spend time with them, yes. But don't compare. You are on your own journey, and there's a joy
mhm.
in the journey. Even the setbacks, remember, that's where you grow your muscles. So, all
Yeah.
that to say, is enjoy the journey and learn throughout the journey because there is joy in the journey.
Yeah, I love the whole comparison game, the whole call out to avoid it. The thing that we want to compare ourselves to is ourselves, right? And so I think just to piggyback on what you just said, it's important to ask yourself as a leader, what's different, right? What's different today than what it was before? Because we have these little installments of learning the stuff that goes on. And different doesn't mean that you're necessarily doing something differently.
Mhm.
Different could be as you're now aware of something that you weren't aware of before. So I
Mhm.
think it's important for us as we're going along because sometimes we feel like we're failures, right? Because we haven't changed. But if we're now aware of things, please celebrate that because that's what's different. Because then you're actually able to do something different when you're aware of it.
It is
Um,
so
Thank
true.
you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I look forward. I'm going to be in the room with you on your podcast and
Yes.
chatting. So, we'll figure out what that looks like. You are a joy and just
Thank
sunshine. And I mean, I just smile when you've got this analogies and everything else. I so appreciate your time. Until next time, this has been Leadership Soundbites with Michelle and Bethany Rees. And have a really freaking awesome day. Thanks.
Thank you.